In tonight's Dateline Defense, politicians in the cyber age. This week, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton explained why she used only one communications device.
When I got to work as Secretary of State, I opted for convenience to use my personal email account, which was allowed by the State Department, because I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of two.
But should convenience be a priority over national security? For insight, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, Colonel Cedric Leighton, a retired Air Force intelligence officer and president of Cedric Leighton Associates. So Cedric, in a recent post for The Hill, you took issue with Hillary Clinton's explanation for why she used one device while she was Secretary of State. Why isn't a matter of convenience a good reason for her actions?
Simply put, Morris, it's about security. And in this particular situation, what you have is the increasing vulnerability of private email accounts, all of the things that were looked at, in terms of the technology, even at the time, required people most generally to have a government account as well as a private account for their own personal business. In my case, I had, in several assignments, I had two phones, one for official business, one for private business, and that was the way we handled it. Those were the Department of Defense regulations, admittedly a different organization than the State Department, but nonetheless there should have probably been a uniform government policy so that there was no question in Secretary Clinton's case.
Now, I need to remind the viewers that among the various hats that you wear, Cedric, you're an expert on cybersecurity. You have clients who hire you for these very reasons, to make sure that their messages are kept secure. Banks, corporations hire you for cybersecurity reasons, so you're our go-to guy on this topic. Now, the Obama administration and the State Department have said there were no hard and fast rules that Clinton had to use two devices. Should there be?
Yes, I think so, because one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure that you have the integrity of your network assured. For example, in this age of bring your own device, or popularly known as BYOD, what you need is a way in which you can make sure that any devices that are brought into the network are compatible with that network and can also be secured by the administrators for your organization. And the same holds true for the State Department. The State Department is one of the most lucrative targets for foreign intelligence agencies, and because of that, their security is even more important, and that's doubly true for somebody in the position of Secretary of State.
Now, your article also highlighted the threat of cyber attacks, adding the quote, Mrs. Clinton's assertion that her server had not been penetrated and her emails had not been compromised is not provable. Is that right?
That is correct. There is no way to conclusively prove that you have not been hacked. In other words, you cannot prove a negative, and that's technically true as well as grammatically true. And in this particular case, she has to be very careful with that assertion. It may be true, but it's doubtful, because the Clinton domain name is something that has come up before. It is something that obviously is a target for those in the know, so she has to be very careful with that. And the State Department, of course, has its own vulnerabilities, which they're trying to deal with and have unsuccessfully in some cases dealt with in the past and even today.
Cedric, you also cited examples of Target and Home Depot not knowing about intrusions for months. How important is it that politicians understand cybersecurity and how hack attacks work in this day and age?
The cyber threat is basically the #1 threat confronting the nation, not only according to people like me, but also according to the Director of National Intelligence. For the third year in a row, he has said that the cyber threat is the #1 threat, outranking terrorism, the threat of all-out war, the threat of nuclear war. Cyber threat is #1. And because it's #1, it becomes very important for policymakers, for people who want to be leading elected officials, to really understand exactly what this is about. They don't need to know the arcane technical details, but what they do need to know are the policy implications of these kinds of matters, because it's very different if you don't understand what security parameters are. What's doable and what's not doable becomes critically important.
All right, let's switch gears. Iraqi forces have made some major strides in the fight against ISIS, retaking the key city of Tikrit. U.S. military officials have been very leery of the country's army in the past for giving up territory to the terrorists. What's changed the tide for these Iraqi soldiers?
I think, in a word, it's Iran. Iran has provided advice to the Shiite militias as well as elements of the Iraqi army, and the main leadership in the area around Tikrit appears to be the Shiite militias. They are basically taken care of by one of the leading Iranian generals, a gentleman by the name of Qasem Soleimani, who is the leader of the Quds Force, which is the arm of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards that is most responsible for special operations and for terrorism in areas outside of Iran.
Now, on top of this, Iranian soldiers themselves have been sent in to fight ISIS. Looking at the bigger picture here, Cedric, do you think this has anything to do with the ongoing nuclear negotiations with Iran? Could these boots on the ground influence the discussion in any way?
I think they can, because what it shows is Iran's willingness to project power. And in the Iranian mindset, they see their operations in Tikrit, which appear to be successful at the present time, as showing the world, and of course the Iraqis and the United States, that what they are doing is commensurate with what a great power could do. They are also looking at this and saying that we are doing a better job than the U.S. That's going to be their going in point. And so what they're going to do is they're going to try to achieve great power, or at least regional power status, at the expense of the United States. And that is something that should concern everyone in the U.S. at this point.
I'm telling you, the Persians, because I have so many, we all have Persian friends being in Washington, but it's a long history. They see themselves as a leader in that part of the world. They're very proud people. The fact that we diminish them does not help, because they see themselves much differently. The world is seeing themselves much differently. The biggest concern is once they get the bomb, everybody else is going to want to get the bomb.
That's exactly right. And you have Saudi Arabia, already making noises with Pakistan and possibly with South Korea about actually developing a bomb or having access to a bomb. There is going to be an arms race in the Persian Gulf region, and it's not going to be pretty, because the types of controls that these people have for these types of weapons are not the same rigid controls that we're used to from the Cold War.
You're exactly right. Good to have you on the show. Colonel Cedric Leighton, president of Cedric Leighton Associates. Thanks again.
Thank you, Morris.